Hey everybody, this is Jesse Weber and welcome to Law and Crime Now. There is so much happening that we need to get through. First up, we're going to Ginelli. They have both entered guilty pleas in the college admissions scandal. We're also going to talk about strange new videos in the Lorie Vallow story. Plus, there's been an update in missing mom Jennifer Doulos' case. But right now, we want to start with a major update in the Ahmaud Arbery shooting out of Georgia. William Bryan, the man who recorded the shooting, person who said that he was an innocent bystander, he was clearly just a witness, he had no relationship with the McMichaels, he has been arrested. And now he is facing charges of felony murder as well as false imprisonment. The GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, held a press conference earlier today, and Director Vic Reynolds spoke about what this arrest means and how it happened. Take a look.
Are you able to tell us what was the last straw that made you make this third arrest?
You know, I don't know if there was a proverbial last straw. I would tell you that in conducting an investigation, what I would ask folks to remember is that we don't go into a situation of this nature investigating a person or persons. We go in investigating a set of facts. And once we start turning stones over, sometimes there's one or two stones underneath there that need to be turned over. And once we reached a point, and it was probably sometime Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, when we began speaking with our folks there, that we reached the point in conjunction with the Cobb District Attorney's Office that we were convinced probable cause existed to make those charges. We proceeded to do that yesterday. It wasn't a proverbial last moment of epiphany or anything of that nature. It was just an accumulation of various things that were there and various things we discovered over the last 16 days. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bryan continuously said he was nothing more than a witness and did not know the McMichaels. Were you all able to determine that Mr. Bryan did know the McMichaels through any set of texts or conversations? Can you speak to how you determined those relationships?
I will say this, again, not to speak on the facts. They'll come out in a court of law, but I can tell you that if we believed he was a witness, we wouldn't have arrested him. So there's probable cause, and we're comfortable with that. Yes, sir.
All right, I'm joined right now by Law and Crime legal analyst Terri Austin and Gene Rossi, as well as Judge Brandon Birmingham. I have a great lineup today. Gene, I want to start with you. What does that mean, what Director Reynolds said? I mean, what was the change? What led to the arrest?
Well, just reading between the lines, I think they probably got additional evidence, either emails, text messages. They talked to witnesses to whom these various parties made admissions or confessions, and they did more due diligence. This is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They don't shoot from the hip, and it's a higher level than the county that is going to prosecute the case. And I just think they got more evidence and realized that there could be a larger film, a longer film, that there were witnesses to the three alleged participants. It could have been an accumulation of things.
Terri, so Director Reynolds was asked, was there something about the search of the McMichaels' home that led to Bryan's arrest? Because we know that the GBI executed a search warrant there. Very tight-lipped, wouldn't go into more details about it. Terri, do you think that they found something at the McMichaels' home, maybe to suggest that Bryan had a relationship with them or that he was complicit in what happened to Arbery?
I do think that they found something there. They are being very tight-lipped. I think they don't want to tip their hand and tell either the public or the other side what they have, but I'm sure they found some evidence to show that Bryan had a former relationship with the McMichaels, either as a neighbor, either an email or a text, so that they could bring him into the arrest situation and make sure that they have everyone. You see the McMichaels there, but they want to make sure they have everyone involved with this crime arrested and pursuing charges against them.
Well, let's not forget, he was the one who took the video, yet evidence came out that Gregory McMichael was the one who helped release the video. So what was the connection between these two? Judge, want to turn it over to you. So he has been charged with felony murder and criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. What does that mean in this case? And is that the right charge? Are those the right charges?
Well, the felony murder rule basically means that if you are committing one felony and during the course of committing that felony, a person is killed, then you are guilty of what they call felony murder. ideas to dissuade people from committing felonies in the first place, certainly when violence is foreseeable. This charge, this conspiracy, this idea that they were acting together implies a relationship. It seems like what we can infer from everything that's happened over the last couple of days is that a relationship has been uncovered that was previously unknown or undisclosed by the witness. And that's where you might be getting these charges for a conspiracy, an agreement to commit a felony, perhaps with the McMichaels, and that death results, and there's your felony murder. It'll be interesting to see how it plays in the future.
Right, and the idea that he was actually trapping him in with the car, that's the big thing. The idea that he was, Bryan placed his car in a position where Arbery couldn't escape. I guess that's the false imprisonment idea. Now, this was something that was brought up a little bit more to Director Vic Reynolds earlier today when he was asked more about the investigation and arrest of Bryan. Take a look.
Mr. Bryan, has he provided any additional footage from that cell phone? In other words, was there more than the 36 seconds that the public has seen?
We have accumulated a number of pieces of video in the case. I'm not going to speak specifically about what we took from him, but eventually that will come out in a court of law. But suffice it to say, there are a number of pieces of video that helped us get to this point.
Yes, sir. Is there anything you can say to reports that Bryan was using his truck to block?
I won't speak to that specifically. I would refer you to the warrant, particularly on the one on false imprisonment. I think it speaks for itself.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds, I was wondering if you can put on your former prosecutor hat on for a moment and put in perspective for folks. We know that Bryan did not pull the trigger, so why would someone like him in these circumstances be charged with murder?
Well, I certainly think that's a fair question. I understand people's concern or curiosity about that, but again, I would point you to what the warrants indicate. Felony murder is a crime in Georgia where if you're committing a felony crime and that crime ends up in the death of another human being, then that's a felony murder. And so, as the warrants indicated, he's charged with an underlying felony. He's also charged with felony murder. So we believe the evidence would indicate that his underlying felony got caused the death of Ahmaud Arbery.
All right, Gene, over to you. Is there more to it than this? Is the idea, let's charge him with really serious crimes here, and he might turn on the McMichaels. He might be the prosecution's star witness. Is there maneuvering to be had here? Is that a reason why he was charged with felony murder?
That's in part. When I was a prosecutor for 27 years, you try to flip defendants like pancakes. And if you have probable cause and a reasonable probability of conviction, and it's a lower level person, you're going to use him against somebody above you on the ladder of criminality. And if I were in that office prosecuting this case, I would do a beeline to his defense attorney, Kevin Goff, and try to work out a deal where he pleads guilty to some felony, maybe drop the felony murder rule, or have him eat the felony murder charge in exchange for a recommendation of a lower sentence. Because if he testifies at trial for the government, it's very bad news for the McMichaels.
So let me ask you about that, Terry. Kevin Goff, who went on CNN, he's been doing these interviews. He's been criticized by many legal commentators that he's not effectively representing his client. And the question is, did he or did the defense in any way hurt themselves by doing a lie detector test, by going on CNN? In a way, did it ultimately lead in a way maybe to this arrest? Was there something that was wrong here? Because he went on TV and even commented on his client's intelligence. Your thoughts on that, Terry?
I think he should have not done that. I think both the defendant and the attorney should have just tried the case in the courtroom when they get there and not in the public. I think having the defendant himself go on talking, I think his wife was in the picture with him. They're trying to make it seem as though, you know, poor me, I was just innocent and I was a bystander. And the attorney himself did make it look as though his client was not that bright. And so I think all in all, it didn't do well for both of them to go on in the public, and it hurt the case. And now you see we have an arrest.
So you actually mentioned trying the case. Judge, obviously we haven't, COVID-19 has put a wrench in a lot of plans in terms of when will they be preliminary hearings or bond hearings or things of that. Would you think there's a possibility that the McMichaels and Bryan could be tried together if no deals are ultimately reached, the three of them in one trial?
It's possible that they could. It depends on what their defenses are. And if those defenses are mutually exclusive, if there's finger pointing, I didn't do this, but the other guy did that, then that's something that the judge is going to have to weigh in making that determination. If all of the defenses are basically congruent, if they're sort of similar, we didn't mean for this to happen, things like that, well, then there's a possibility that all three could be tried together.
You know, it is fascinating. We were actually talking yesterday, our team, how there's always updates in this case. And literally, as we said that, the arrest came down, the announcement from the GBI that William Bryan was arrested. Now, it should be noted that Kevin Go has not made any comment as of yet about the arrest of his client, so we're waiting to see what will happen. Now, there's clearly more to talk about with the arrest, what this means, but when we come back, we also want to focus on the release of these new videos in the Arbery case of Ahmaud Arbery in 2017. One was the tasing video that you might have seen, but also number two is this new video of him being arrested for allegedly stealing a television. How's that going to factor into this case? We'll talk about it on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back right after this. And welcome back, everybody. We're still talking about the new arrest of William Bryan in the Ahmaud Arbery case. This is the man who actually recorded the shooting. He had said that he was a witness. He had no relationship with the McMichaels, an innocent bystander, and yet he has been arrested for felony murder and false imprisonment charges. We're going to get to that in a second. But I want to turn our attention to these new videos that were released of interactions with Ahmaud Arbery and the police back in 2017. The first one up, you might not have seen this, is when Ahmaud Arbery was arrested for shoplifting or allegedly shoplifting a television in 2017. Take a look at this if you haven't seen it.
Right across from Captain D.
What TV? Your TV is in there.
Dispatch, show me 23 in the parking lot.
I had a receipt, bro.
Where's the receipt at?
Stay, I didn't stay seated.
I got money,
You know what?
bro.
You know what?
I'm not a bro.
I want you to lay on your stomach. Lay on your stomach.
I'm not laying
Lay on your stomach.
So which one you guys want to
Lay on your stomach. You're under arrest.
All right, and then Arbery was confronted by these officers where they attempted to tase him merely for where he was hanging out. Take a look.
I know, but you're coming up on me. You make me kind of nervous, okay?
You bothering me for nothing. You can't go in my car.
You're not allowing me to search your car?
You can't go in my shit.
I'm not asking you. Just don't reach the car, man.
Get your hand out of your pocket.
Hands out of your pocket.
Hand out of your pocket. Down. Warning, down.
Stay on the ground. Just stay on the ground, okay?
Keep your hands out. No, keep
I've
your hands out.
I've already checked him
Listen
for
to me.
weapons. I've checked him for weapons.
Okay.
That's a pretty remarkable video. It's my understanding that the only thing that prevented the tasing was the malfunction of the actual weapon itself. Terri, I want to turn this over. These videos, what's your impression of them, and are they going to have an impact at all in this case?
Jesse, I have to tell you, it is very difficult as a mother, as a person of color, to watch these types of videos where individuals are getting stopped and asked questions and frisked. I'm not sure of what happened behind the scenes, whether or not there was a television stolen, but it is clear that these police officers are using, in my opinion, what might be excessive force. He turned that taser on, and clearly Ahmaud Arbery in that instance was, backing up, holding his arms up. So I think if they show the videos at trial, it depends on the jury, but I do think it would actually help the prosecution, showing that, Ahmaud was literally, forced into these types of situations because of the color of his skin.
And I wonder if the defense would put it forward and try to say that Ahmaud Arbery didn't respect authority or was aggressive, and how that might work, and it might actually turn up against them. It's curious how these videos will be interpreted and used in the future, but it does raise a question about the police department. It does raise a question about the DA's office, which have come under investigation. Let's not forget the GBI was brought in to determine if there was any prosecutorial misconduct for the fact that it took a month or 2 months and this video to be released of the shooting for there to be answers. So This is actually Director Vic Reynolds of the GBI speaking about the prosecutorial misconduct investigation and how it's going. Take a look.
The question is what the status is regarding the investigation that we've been asked to do about potential prosecutorial misconduct. As you recall, we were asked by the Attorney General's office to conduct a separate and distinct investigation into that. The Bureau is doing that. I don't have a timeline on that, but I do anticipate it's not going to take us much longer to finish it. Once that's completed, what will procedurally happen is we will turn that file over to the Attorney General's office. They will be the deciding agency or entity in what, if anything, happens in that regard. Our agents, a separate team of agents, are conducting that investigation. And again, I don't have a definitive timeline, but I am confident in telling you that I don't anticipate it will be much longer until we're through with that as well.
All right, Gene, you heard Director Reynolds. What do you make of where the investigation is right now?
Well, I got to give the Attorney General of Georgia kudos for ordering an investigation to prosecutorial misconduct. As I said before, I was a prosecutor for almost 30 years, and I can tell you this right now. Any allegation of prosecutorial misconduct should be investigated to the hilt, and punishment should be severe because you hold a high position of trust. What troubles me greatly about the Arbery case is the prosecutor, within 48 hours, wrote a letter or made a statement and analysis of the case against the McMichaels. And I got to tell you this, I am asking this question. Where the heck is the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division? Because there is at least some evidence that there was a violation of color of law in this case. Now let's go to the investigation by the GBI. I pause a little bit. I don't see how he can complete an investigation quickly in this matter. You got to interview probably 10, 20, 30 witnesses, lots of documents. I don't see how they can do it quickly. If they can, God bless them. But if they get a report within the next week or within the next month, my gut is they didn't do a good job. That's my opinion.
Judge, what about the other side? I mean, is it easy to defend against this and say, hey, listen, you know, we didn't make a decision there. We only had limited evidence. We brought new attention to it. Really, no one should be fired. There's a reason that the judges recused themselves. There's a reason DAs recused themselves. There really was nothing wrong here. It was just, you know what? It's just the circumstances of what happened. Is that a viable argument, a viable defense?
Well, let me just say this. As an elected official, as a person who has worked my entire career in the government, transparency and accountability are absolutely critical to the health and the safety and the future of our criminal justice system in our country. And if it is a righteous deal and there was no prosecutorial misconduct, then there should be full cooperation. There should be transparency. There shouldn't be any fighting of any internal memorandum or the release of any documents. Everything should be, all cards should be laid out on the table. And if that is where the investigation leads, that there was no misconduct, fair be it. But if there is problems and there was misconduct, then I want to echo my friend Mr. Rossi and say that that should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Well, I tell you what, Joyette Holmes, who's the current DA on this case, also spoke during the press conference today about how this case really should be handled and tried, and offered a warning. Take a look.
That we are going to make sure that we find justice in this case. We know that we have a broken family and a broken community down in Brunswick. Now, I do ask, I know that there are a lot of people who have questions about next steps, about the facts, about where we go from here. But we ask that you allow us to try those things in the courtroom for the sanctity of this case and just making sure that we are able to do what we as prosecutors are called to do as ministers of justice.
Terri, what's your reaction to her statement? Clearly, with all this information coming forward, you know, although people have no sympathy for the McMichaels at this point, it seems that a lot of this is being tried in the court of public opinion as opposed to a court of law. And is there a danger here? Is there something to be concerned about? Or is this just an issue of transparency and everybody has a right to give their opinion of what's happening? I mean, what's your reaction to what we just heard?
Jesse, I think it's a very delicate balance. I think the prosecution clearly is going to come out and make a statement. They're going to say they're working with the victims and the family and that they are going to pursue the case to the extent of the law. And I think on the other side, the defense is going to try to make their case in the public opinion. But really and truly, here in the United States, we really should be trying our cases in the courtroom. And I absolutely think that public opinion will influence what happens, not just with this particular trial, but on the federal level, whether or not this is pursued as a hate crime, whether or not we are pursuing prosecutorial misconduct. So there is a place, Jesse, for this type of public opinion for both sides.
Well, I tell you what, if it wasn't for the public and if it wasn't for social media and this video being released and circulated, we might not be here today. So that's something to think about as well. We're going to switch gears right now because we had a big development today, and this is over at the college admissions scandal. Actress Lorie Lachlan and her husband, fashion designer Massimo Ginelli, have officially entered guilty pleas to conspiracy charges. And as part of these plea deals, we know that Lorie Lachlan is going to agree to spend 2 months in prison. Massimo Ginelli, 5 months in prison. They'll both face fines, supervised release, and community service. Now, they actually entered these pleas today over a Zoom call over the court. Now it's up to the judge to decide whether or not he will accept or reject these guilty pleas. And we know that a sentencing has been set for August 21st. Judge, I want to turn it over to you first. Do you think Judge Gorton, is there any possibility he would reject these plea deals and say, you know what, 2 months, 5 months, not enough, you got to go to trial?
It's always a possibility for a judge not to accept a plea bargain, no matter how badly the sides want to enter into it. I think the things that the judge will be considering is where does this case fall along the line of all the other ones? Is this an outlier sentence compared to some of the other cases, depending on the person's involvement? And perhaps if it is an outlier, if it doesn't make sense, if it's not in line with what the result of the other cases were, then it is certainly a possibility the judge could reject it. Although I will say it is unusual for a judge to do so. Most times that there's a plea bargain, the judge will go along with it after considering the facts and circumstances of the case.
Gene, why do you think they decided to reach a deal now? You think they had this in their mind for a while, or do you think recent events ultimately led to this? I'm curious what you think the negotiation looked like with the government.
I think as somebody now is in a criminal defense attorney, it could be a variety of factors. One could be they realize that the quantum of evidence is overwhelming because they've had time to view discovery. And at the federal level, especially the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston, and I know the U.S. Attorney, I'm sure they had an open file policy. So that's one. Number two, financial. To prepare for and conduct a criminal trial, if you're paying counsel, that's a lot of money. That could be part of it. And the third thing is the government may have had some litigation risks. So they probably felt that a generous plea offer was in their best interest. But I hesitate to correct the judge, but I want to add this. A federal judge only has the right to reject the guilty plea if there's a sentencing recommendation. If it's a Rule 11C1C plea, where if the judge accepts the plea, he has to accept the sentence. They call it a C1C plea. Mm-hmm. This seems like it's a recommendation to the judge of what the guidelines levels are, and the only way the judge has the authority to reject the plea is if he doesn't think there's a prima facie case of the elements of the crime.
Right. So it seems unlikely that he would reject it. Terri, I want to get you a question. A lot of people are thinking that the coronavirus played a role here and that they think, hey, if we plead guilty early, maybe we could be sentenced to home arrest and that's where we'll spend our time. Coupled with the fact, Terri, that today they actually asked for their sentencing to be moved earlier to July 30th, not August. Yet it seems like the judge is going to keep it in August. We have about 30 seconds. Do you think coronavirus and maybe home arrest played a factor in their decision?
I do, Jesse. I think that there have been many factors, and I think the coronavirus is affecting everyone's thoughts And here they're thinking, look, let me plead. Hopefully the judge will accept it. And then we will ask to get out of jail literally because of the virus. So yes, it had something to do with it.
Well, I got to tell you, it was surprising to say the least. We're going to see what happens as the summer progresses, and we will see what happens with their sentencing. Judge, thank you so much. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. When we come back, new videos in the Lorie Vallow-Daybell story. Stay tuned.
Shannon, are you home? Police department, if anyone's inside, make yourself known.
Chris Watts just annihilated and buried his entire family.
Chris did not take into account security cameras. He didn't watch enough CSI.
The next door neighbor is showing the surveillance footage of Chris Watts loading up his truck at 5 o'clock in the morning.
It's on video 527.
You told me that she went on a play date. He honestly thought he could fool everyone.
And welcome back, everybody. We want to focus right now on the Lorie Vallow-Daybell case. As you know, this is the Idaho mother who's been charged in connection with the disappearance of her children. JJ and Tylee have not been seen since September. And now there's the release of this eerie new footage. Let's go back to January 31st, 2019, when Charles Vallow, who was then Lorie's husband, calls the police and says that he comes back from a business trip. Lorie locked him out of the house. She took his money, took the cars, can't get a hold of his kids, and he's very worried. Says that she has been threatening his life. This is very, very disturbing images, and I want to actually go to this because we know that Charles Vallow, it was only a few months later that he would be dead, that he would be allegedly shot by Alex Cox, and who is Lorie Vallow's brother, and what has been described as a apparent self-defense. Not really sure, but I'll tell you what, let's start with the Charles Vallow videos, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
I can't get in touch with my kids.
How old are your kids?
6.5 and 16, okay?
How long have you been trying?
2 days.
Okay.
But she's lost her mind. I don't know how else to say it. We're LDS. She thinks she's a resurrected being and a God, and remember the 144,000. Jesus is coming next year. She took all the money out of her bank account today. My truck is gone from the airport. She went to the airport and got it.
And you said this has been going on for like 4 years?
Well, it's to an extent, but it's gotten really bad the last several months. And I've been trying to ignore it because hoping it'll get better.
Is she on any medications?
No, she won't do medications.
Has she been to a doctor?
No, she won't go to the doctor because she's a translated being, and they would find out that she's translated. She cannot be killed. She cannot die.
And that's what she thinks?
Yes.
Okay. And she's been telling you that?
Yes, and Gabe too.
Okay.
He heard this, not just me. This isn't coming. I love her to death. This is killing me, officer.
Oh, I can understand.
Our 13th anniversary is next month. We've been at a great marriage. All of a sudden, the last month it just blew up.
Mm-hmm.
She just lost connection.
Okay, I'm back here with Gene Rossi, Terri Austin, but also forensic death investigator from Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, I want to start with you on this. We've been following the Lorie Vallow-Daybell case together. Your reaction to what we're watching?
Well, I think that you framed it quite right, Jesse. It's haunting. It's disturbing because it's almost a portent of what's to come down the tracks. I guess I'm being a bit melodramatic there, but you know, as we have followed this case ad nauseum, I'm no longer surprised by things that kind of pop up on the horizon with this case because I'm left shaking my head. I guess at the end of the day, we want to know where these kids are, and all the way back then, he was, out of touch with his kids, and this has been an ongoing problem. You know, we kind of hear it from his. From his mouth at that point in time that this has been an escalating problem, and now we see this super bizarre behavior that she's exhibited in the interim. You know, since Charles's death, it's just continued to snowball with these predictions of the apocalypse coming in July, and still there's no sign of these children anywhere to be found.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Gene, over to you. Is this going to factor into the charges that she's facing, into the trial that she's facing in any way?
The kids are missing?
Yes, the missing kids, the charges that she faces with respect to the kids.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I got to say, what is very disheartening about this case is just watching that video of Charles. He sounds like a very reasonable man, but he mentioned for 13 years they've been married. He loved his wife, and he's trying to do his best. And it just breaks my heart that we have gotten to this point. But you're right; it would make a difference at the trial. Yes.
Well, and it should be noted it was only a short time later that he actually would file for divorce. Terry, what about the investigation into what happened with Charles Vallow? Alex Cox died, and now it's been ruled that he died of natural causes. How is this going to factor into it? Because we know that Lorie and her husband, her current husband, Chad Daybell, are being investigated for multiple deaths surrounding them. But in terms of the Charles Vallow investigation, is this going to change anything?
I do think that this video will change the investigation because it really shows that Charles, before his death, was leery and wondering what is going on with Lorie. The fact that, there she is acting crazy. She isn't letting him back in the house, and he's concerned about the welfare of his children. He's concerned about his own welfare, and he's trying to tell the police, look, help me here. The police are in a difficult situation because no crime has really been committed at that point. But yes, I think if this video is shown at trial, it's really going to hurt Lorie, and it's going to show that she did have some issues prior to Charles's death and the killing of Charles by her brother, actually.
Well, look, we at Law&Crime, we obtained this from the police department. It was in their custody. It's not like it just came out of nowhere. So what they knew already is interesting to think about. Now, I will tell you this much. Charles Vallow was asked about threats to himself and the children during this police visit, and here's what he had to say.
So what makes her a danger to herself and to others?
She threatened me, murder me, kill me.
She threatened to murder you?
Yes. And she said,
how did she do that?
My bishop right there is in the car. He was on the phone with me today when she said, I will have you destroyed, is what she said there.
Okay, that's not a threat to kill you.
Yesterday was a threat to kill me. The day before
what did she say yesterday?
She said, you're not Charles. I don't know who you are, what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now with my powers.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Says I'm gonna kill you too. Yesterday was
So she's speaking as a spiritual being.
Yeah, she's not here. She's lost her reality.
Is this just all recent, or has it been going on?
It's been going on for about 4 or 5 years. It's gotten really, really bad lately. She goes to the temple every day and speaks with Moroni and Jesus Christ, and they tell her what to do. And now she came to her today, and last couple of days she says, I'm not Charles. You're not Charles. You're Nick Schneider. I don't know where she gets his names from. She got all this stuff from these people in Utah who tell her how many past lives she's had and probation she's had. And she's was married to Moroni way back when, and she was also married to James the Just. And
okay, this is all foreign to me. So
it's foreign to me.
Well, I'm not LDS.
It's crazy stuff.
I know you're using LDS terms here.
I know, but it's just she's nonsensical.
Has she made any statements about wanting to hurt the children or anything?
Today she said with Gabe on the phone, come take the kids. I don't care what happens to them. Come take them.
Okay, but she didn't make a direct threat towards the kids.
No, not a direct threat.
Okay. And then she said that she would murder you through a spiritual...
No, she said, I can murder you.
I can murder you. And she's talking in a spirit...
I will kill you.
Spiritual.
No, she's talking physically. I will kill you because you're not Charles, and nobody will care.
Joseph, I want to ask you a two-part question here. Does this give you any insight into what happened to the kids? And B, does it give you any further information or details about what happened to Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell's former wife, who died under what we thought was natural circumstances, but the police are now looking at it again, and they've conducted another autopsy and have not released the details. So does what you just heard give you any insight or information to what's going on with the kids or what happened to Tammy?
Well, I think, from Charles's mouth, what we're hearing is that there's a diminishment of the value of the children. She'll do away with them. And she perceives herself to be, this spiritual being. It's kind of odd. The police officer said, well, she said she'd destroy you. That's not really a threat. And I'm thinking, wow, maybe not in a physical sense, a metaphysical sense. I don't know. What are you saying here? She's saying, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to kill you. Now, if we take that same line of logic and we apply it to Tammy Daybell, it's my thought is, because it was so very, very botched from a medical legal standpoint, there's all bets are off. We don't know what happened to this woman because no one examined her in an appropriate manner. I mean, the wheels really came off of this case, Jesse. We've talked about this extensively. We didn't even have any blood draws to go back on, or urine, or even vitreous fluid from the eyes. And so now we're dealing with a corpse that's been in the ground for 3 months in another state. However, there's a silver lining to all of this. And I got to tell you, I'll make it real brief. The silver lining is this: you've got so many dead bodies all over the place that now, since they've consolidated this case with the AG in Idaho, and I don't want to step on the toes of esteemed counsel, they've consolidated this investigation. One of the big keys here is going to be Tylee. She was last known to be in Yellowstone. I've said this over and over again on a number of shows. The FBI, the Justice Department, is interested in this case because now she's gone missing in federal property at this point in time. So they've got the long arm of the law on this, and I think that that's very compelling. That's our silver lining.
Gene, I want to get to you real quick, about 30 seconds. Could this be used by defense if they ever go forward with an insanity plea?
You know what? It could, but I have to tell you, insanity pleas are very difficult, and they often fail. There are a couple of exceptions. They could make the insanity defense. I don't think it's appropriate here. The actions of her allegedly, and also Mr. Daybell, come across allegedly as very premeditated.
Yeah. And I tell you, look, she had a mental health check, and, I'm not sure how this would ultimately play out, but it is something to watch. Look, when we come back, we're going to talk about the missing mom, Jennifer Doulos. We have an update in that case. Stay tuned.
Shannon, are you home? Police department, if anyone's inside, make yourself known.
Chris Watts just annihilated and buried his entire family.
Chris did not take into account security cameras. He didn't watch enough CSI.
The next door neighbor is showing the surveillance footage of Chris Watts loading up his truck at 5 o'clock in the morning.
It's on video 527.
You told me that she went on a play date. He honestly thought he could fool everyone.
And welcome back, everybody. We have an update for you in the case of missing Connecticut mom, Jennifer Doulos. In fact, May 24th will mark the 1-year anniversary of when she disappeared. Now, as you may know, Fotis Doulos, her estranged husband, who was charged with her murder, committed suicide in January. But let's talk about Michelle Troconis, who was Fotis Doulos' former girlfriend, and she too is facing several charges. She's been charged with conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence, hindering prosecution. She has issued a statement, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But before we do, let's go back to when Troconis' attorney in January had this to say about her case.
Today was just about loosening the restrictions on her house arrest. We have postponed until March 20th consideration of any other motions that will be pending or are already pending. Perhaps that will be when we discuss the change of venue, that is moving the case to the Hartford Judicial District. Other than that, it was more of a first court appearance. Michelle pled not guilty today on the most recent charges and asked for a jury. And until I've reviewed the material that were just given to me, and that's why I brought this large briefcase, I have no other comment because I don't know enough to say anything other than what I've said before. Michelle is innocent of these charges, and we plan to fight them through the courts. Thank you very much.
Can you share any reaction to the death of Fotis Doulos from Mr. Konis?
No, I would say that that's not appropriate.
Mr. Konis, is there anything you want to?
So, as I said, Michelle Troconis just issued a statement as we hit this one-year mark. And we're going to put it up right now. And just to give you an idea, she says, I am saddened for the loss that these 5 children have suffered, meaning, of course, Jennifer and Fotis' children. I know nothing about Jennifer Doulos' whereabouts or what may have happened to her. I think it was a mistake to have trusted him, meaning Fotis Doulos. We also saw a response, or not a response, a statement from Jennifer Doulos' family as well. We're going to put it up as well. And they basically said, we miss Jennifer beyond words. The ache of her absence doesn't go away. Countless questions remain unanswered. We know Jennifer has not been forgotten. 2 people have been arrested for conspiracy to murder and have yet to stand trial. That day will come. The calls for justice for Jennifer are powerful and moving. Terri, first, why did Michelle Troconis issue this statement?
You know, it's interesting. We talked about this before, Jesse. Everyone is trying their case in the public forum here. I think Michelle, it's been a year. She wants people to know that, you know, she's a sympathetic person, that she wasn't involved, that it was all Doulos, who's now dead, and she feels sad for Jennifer and Jennifer's family. I think she is trying to get public opinion on her side before she eventually faces trial.
Joseph, we still don't really know what happened to Jennifer. Her body has not been found. It sounds like from this statement, we are not going to get more answers. I mean, you're looking at this, trying to piece together the puzzle of what happened, how this body or what happened to her, was there disposal, how did this crime occur, and she's still not here. So when you hear this statement, how does it affect your view of the investigation?
Well, it tells me as an investigator that, you know, we're going to have to be more probative in other areas. We've got to make sure that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed relative to the evidence that we do have at hand. Let's not forget all of those areas of blood, that sort of thing that were recovered at the home. I think that that's going to be what will tell the tale, at least at this point. We know that something happened, obviously, that goes without saying, but the fact that this key witness, you know, and all along I've kind of thought that, you know, with Troconis and also the attorney, that they were probably being leveraged in order to get to Fotis. And now he's out of the picture. It's going to be very interesting as an investigator and also as a trial watcher to see how they are leveraged by the prosecution at this point moving forward.
That is a great question that I want to ask Gene, because Gene, we know that Kent Mulhenny, who was Fotis Doulos' former attorney, he's been charged as well. Does this statement from Troconis give you an idea about maybe a strategy they have? Maybe they want to take a deal, say, hey, we could give you information. Kent's the one we're going to go after. I mean, how do you think that's going to play out?
I don't want to read anything into that statement by the attorney for Michelle at all, because he doesn't have the discovery. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes in terms of plea negotiations. I think we would be just speculating at best to figure out, you know, who's pointing the fingers at who else. So I want to keep my powder dry on this one.
That's a very conservative and appropriate answer to my question, although it doesn't help us here because we do want more answers here. Now, Terri, I think I can get one more question out. You heard the family's response. This is unbelievably difficult for them. If you were a representative of the family, what would you counsel them at this point?
I think I would tell them to hold on, that justice will ultimately be served. Clearly, they're not going to get justice as it relates to Fotis Doulos because he has committed suicide and he's gone. But ultimately, I think, hold on, be patient, and let the justice system work its way through. And hopefully, they will have charges and make sure that there's a conviction against Troconis.
Joseph, 20 seconds. Based upon all the evidence you've seen, if we take Michelle Troconis out of her word, is it really possible she had no idea what happened? Because I remember there's some surveillance footage that might say otherwise. About 15 seconds, 20 seconds.
I have a very difficult time believing that she hasn't heard peep about this. I think that she has information. It's just It's how the investigators and the prosecution play their cards relative to her, and it all comes down to leverage.
And we're going to be watching to see what happens next. Gene, Terry, Joseph, thank you all for coming on. Everyone out there, thank you for joining us. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, and maybe more importantly, have a safe weekend. We'll see you next week.